People with extremely high IQ are often seen as the smartest in the room, the ones who understand more, think faster, see what others miss. But what almost no one talks about is that they are also more likely to overthink everything, struggle to connect with people, and feel completely alone in a world that doesn't think like they do. And the strangest part, most of this happens silently, where no one else can see it. If you're into understanding how the mind really works beneath the surface, consider subscribing, because what we're about to break down might completely change how you see intelligence. Because high IQ isn't just about being smart, it's about experiencing reality differently. And that difference starts with how they process the world. Most people filter information. They focus on what matters, ignore the rest, and move on. But people with extremely high intelligence don't do that as easily. They notice more. Patterns, micro-expressions, tiny inconsistencies in behavior. Things that seem invisible to everyone else suddenly stand out. At first, that sounds like a superpower. And in some ways, it is. But over time, it creates something else. Because when your brain constantly picks up more information than it needs, it doesn't know when to stop. And that's where the problem begins. Because their mind doesn't just observe, it analyzes, relentlessly. A simple conversation turns into layers of interpretation. What did they mean by that? Why did they say it that way? Was that intentional? And before they realize it, they're no longer in the moment. They're inside their own head, breaking everything down and rebuilding it again. This is where overthinking stops being a habit and starts becoming a default state. And here's what makes it worse. The smarter someone is, the better they are at justifying every possible scenario, which means every thought feels valid, every possibility feels real, and every decision becomes harder to make. Because when you can see 10 possible outcomes instead of 2, choosing one suddenly feels risky. So instead of acting, they hesitate. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they can see too much. And that leads to something most people never connect with intelligence. Mental exhaustion. Not from doing too much, but from thinking too much. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your brain just won't turn off, even when you want it to? I'm curious. Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. But overthinking is only one piece of this. Because there's another pattern that shows up. And it's even more isolating. Connection. Or more specifically, the lack of it. People with extremely high IQ often struggle to find conversations that truly engage them. Not because they're trying to be difficult, but because their brain naturally looks for depth, complexity, something beyond the surface. And when most conversations stay at a surface level, it starts to feel repetitive, predictable, almost scripted. So they adapt. They nod, they respond, they participate. But internally, they're disconnected. And over time, that creates a very specific kind of loneliness. Not the kind where you're physically alone, but the kind where you feel alone, even when you're surrounded by people. And here's the part that most people get wrong. This isn't about ego. It's not about thinking they're better than others. It's about struggling to find mental alignment, a conversation that challenges them, a perspective that surprises them, something that actually feels engaging. Without that, connection starts to feel like effort, and effort eventually becomes avoidance. So they withdraw, not dramatically, but gradually. Less interest in small talk, less energy for shallow conversations, more time spent alone, inside their own thoughts. And if you've been paying attention, that's where things start to overlap, because the same mind that overthinks everything is now spending more time alone, which means more thinking, more analyzing, more self-reflection. And that's where another layer appears, self-awareness. People with extremely high IQ don't just analyze the world, they analyze themselves, constantly. Their decisions, their behavior, their thoughts, even their own emotions. And while that might sound like a good thing, too much self-awareness can become a trap. Because when you are always aware of how you think, you never get a break from it. You're always evaluating, always questioning, always refining. And eventually, that turns into doubt. Because the more perspectives you can see, the harder it becomes to feel certain about any of them, which creates a strange contradiction. They understand more than most people, but feel less sure than anyone else. And this doesn't just affect their thoughts. It affects their emotions too. Because high intelligence often comes with heightened emotional depth, not always in obvious ways, but in intensity. Small things feel bigger. Moments last longer. Memories carry more weight. It's like experiencing life with more layers attached to everything, which sounds powerful, until you realize it also means carrying more emotional load. Because when everything feels deeper, it's harder to let things go. A small comment can stay in their mind for hours. A mistake can replay over and over again. A situation can be analyzed long after it's over. And this is where another pattern starts to take control. Perfectionism. Not the kind that motivates progress, but the kind that quietly blocks it. Because when your standards are extremely high, nothing ever feels finished. Nothing ever feels good enough. There's always something to improve, something to fix, something to rethink. So instead of moving forward, they pause. They adjust. They rethink again. And sometimes they don't move at all, because doing something imperfectly feels worse than not doing it at all. But here's where everything shifts, because despite all of this, high intelligence is still an advantage, a powerful one. The ability to see patterns, to understand complexity, to connect ideas in ways most people can't. That doesn't disappear. The difference, is whether it's controlled or controlling, because without awareness, it leads to overthinking, isolation, and constant mental noise. But with the right balance, it becomes something else entirely. Clarity, creativity, insight, the ability to understand the world on a deeper level without getting lost in it. And maybe that's the part no one talks about. It's not intelligence itself that defines the outcome. It's how you learn to live with it, how you manage the noise, how you stay present in a mind that naturally wants to go deeper. Because, in the end, the same mind that can overanalyze everything is also the mind that can see what others never will. If you made it this far, seriously, thank you for watching. And if you enjoy content that dives deeper into how people think, Focus Theory appreciates you being here more than you know. I'll see you in the next one.